Hello? This is pretty, I'm hooked.
Do you want to use
Let me tune up a little bit, yeah.
Do you want to use that on the stand?
I can just rest it here, I guess.
No, but that microphone for the guitar.
I don't know, I think that, how's it? Can you kind of hear the guitar with the? I'm breaking the fourth wall here, folks.
So you don't need this thing?
I don't think so.
You're good then.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Let's see. It was tuned when I bought it. Hold on. I'm on the altar. I don't know what I'm supposed. How much am I allowed to drop? Thank you all for coming. If I'd known this kind of turnout, I would have worked a little harder on the quality. Well, what are you going to do? Too late now. I usually have a big staff that goes with me everywhere, but
Well, I help you.
now I have an ordained crew. Thanks, Father. Sounds so serious already, right? Just going to tune up. Don't worry, there aren't many songs. Close. Where's Don? How am I doing, Don? Can you hear the guitar? Kind of okay? Good. Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to be introduced or... Oh, okay, Father. Stepping on the Father's lines.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here tonight. The reason we do in a church because the acoustic here is much better than we do in a hall, and that's why we do it here in a church. And we're very blessed to have our speaker here tonight, and I will have the member of the Women's Guild to introduce him later on, who he is. If you read all the things that he did or he's doing right now, it's like a litany of things. It's too long, okay? And we had a dinner in the rectory earlier, and he's just a magnificent guy. You know, the season of Lent is season of conversion. And you hear his story, it's very, very magnificent. You go from one extreme to the other. And so you're going to be intrigued by his story. But I'm saying thank you so much for being here. And after the talk today, we're going to have a little light reception in the hall. And I'll invite you to come to join us. And then you can ask this man here any question you want. All right? And he's a great man. Without further ado, I want Kristen to come up and introduce our speaker for tonight. I want to acknowledge the Women's Guild for sponsoring our talk tonight as well. So thank you so much for bringing our speaker tonight and for this event for the Paris. Weston?
Come on, folks. There you go. I don't even know her, and I'm doing it. There you go.
So, from writing episodes of Seinfeld, Cheers, Will and Grace, to working on with such comedic legends such as Steve Allen, Bob Hope, Lucille Ball, Billy Crystal, Chevy Chase, Christopher Guest. I mean, the list just goes on. But Mr. Leopold has been at the epicenter of comedy for nearly 50 years. His career as a comedy writer has even moved beyond television into writing novels and writing for various shows, including the Mark Twain Awards, which honored Tina Fey, and the Mark Twain Awards honoring Will Ferrell, and even comedy speeches for the likes of Sandra Day O'Connor, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Governor Mark Pence of Indiana. But more importantly, for tonight's program, we're going to talk about the comedy writer who found God. How appropriate for St. Francis here in the location that he's doing his little talk. So his journey to faith was a circuitous one. I think I said that right. With plenty of pain and laughs along the way. Growing up as actually a secular Jew on the edge of a Florida golf course that actually restricted people like him from participating. His parents worshiped showbiz, though, and especially musical comedy. And they actually only joined the local synagogue because they were putting on a show, Guys and Dolls, and they were having open auditions. And so that value system formed a solid launching pad for the success of Leopold's showbiz ambitions, but kind of left him rudderless down in the future when tragedy struck his family. So when his youngest daughter, Gussie, was stricken with a life-threatening eating disorder, he and his wife did everything in their power to help her. After years of therapy and doctors, they still had no answers. And a friend had suggested reading a book by Father Jonathan Morris called The Promise, God's Purpose and Plan for When Life Hurts. So he did, and he started to find some answers, but not long after, he was actually walking down the street carrying the book when he ran into the author right on the street. And Father Morris said there's no coincidences. The Lord has a plan and there's a supernatural reality. Sometimes we come to God through suffering. Sometimes we lose God through suffering. But after Mr. Leopold assured Father Morris that he paid full price for the book, and Father Morris mentioned that his favorite episode of Seinfeld was actually the one that Mr. Leopold had just happened to have written himself, he unwittingly was on the path to conversion. So, but how was he going to break it to his mother, right? I think he told her that he the church offered him a role in another show, West Side Story, of Riff, and there was an opening for a more mature Maria. And, he wondered how he would explain it to all his friends, all the mostly secular Jew showbiz friends that he had. But ultimately, he knew it really didn't matter what anyone else thought, because he found his faith and he found God. And incidentally, for this particular talk that we are very blessed to hear this evening, Mr. Leopold was awarded the Spirit Award by the Christophers. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Tom Leopold.
Oh.
Thank you.
Very good. You did my whole talk. That was my entire talk. All my jokes, you did? Oh, you left some out. Thank you. That was very lovely. Thank you. I hear all that. I'm surprised I'm only this old. Did so much. How could I have done so much? Well, the answer is simple. A complete disregard for quality, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, I would never have time for television. Anyway, here's my talk. A comedy writer finds God, and it's not like God was missing and I ran into him at CVS or anything. God was doing fine. I might have been a little lost, but anyway, here's my story. And I'll start with this little song. called All Washed Up. A little bit about my career, but more about my journey to faith. Well, I washed up on the, let me start again. I washed up on the rock of ages. Sorry, folks. I'm out of tune. Okay. I washed up on the rock of ages. All my life I've been lost at sea. Laying low, making workman's wages till my Lord came. Start over again. I'm sorry. I'm going to go home. This is just not working. Start again. This keeps bothering me. I washed up on the rock of ages. All my life I've been lost at sea. Laying low, making workman's wages till the Lord cast his net for me. My lungs were filled with the river Jordan. I had fish hanging off of me. Till a voice like a priest or warden said, "You're free, son, follow me." Oh no, she cried, the water's wide, my boat's too small. I don't know if we'll get across it all. Ba 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 ba. I've read all of the Bible's pages, saw 10 Commandments on TV. Charlton Heston was a lovely Moses, but there's just one star for me. Oh no, she cried, the water's wide, my boat's so small. I don't know if we'll get across it all. Thank you. Got through that one. Anyway, I was born into a Jewish family. Actually, we were what they call culturally Jewish, which means we had a Christmas tree every year. We didn't fast on Yom Kippur. Went out of our way to eat pork, you know. But to the rest of the world, we were Jewish, and we suffered accordingly. And like you said, that I grew up on a golf course my father couldn't play on because it was restricted. And Dad had to drive miles to play a round of golf when the most beautiful course in Miami, which is a weird place I was from, was right in our backyard. Our sprinklers watered it. When somebody would hit a ball in our yard, my mom would go, "Look, Gentile, here they come." Anyway, my parents were very proud to be Jewish. They just weren't into the religious part of it. And, you know, let's face it, as a father will tell you, religion is a big part of any religion. I think I can say that safely, ladies and gentlemen. My folks were into the religious part of show business. They particularly loved the musical theater. And it's a true story, they only joined a synagogue to audition for the shows. As soon as they heard there was an open call for My Fair Lady at Temple Beth Am, my parents go there, they get supporting roles, and which is amazing because none of the congregation had seen their work, and they were very good. But for me, an 8-year-old kid who had never had any religious training, my 3 brothers and I were never bar mitzvahed, it was weird to see my dad up on stage wearing a big yarmulke, singing "Get Me to the Church on Time." It was very confusing, you know? It was like one of those big yarmulkes, too. It looked like it had room for 6 emergency yarmulkes in it, you know? Anyway, my brothers and I did go for religious training one time only. When I was about 12, my grandfather, my mom's grandfather, who I adored, passed away suddenly playing golf on a course that didn't allow Gentiles. The man died surrounded by 11 doctors. 8 of whom asked to play through. They asked to play through. He died. Terrible. So that night, and this is all, I had to write it like jokes because it's all true. The only way I can get through it. But anyway, that night, my mom solemnly gathered me and my 3 brothers all in our short pants, Miami pajamas. We always had short pants. But anybody else have to? It was humiliating, really. My wife can't stand them. So she gathers us all together, and we all looked like we were in this kind of sleep clinic internment camp in these short pajamas. And so my grandfather dies, and my mother all of a sudden got very religious. Not for herself, but for my brothers and me. And from that night on, we had to say the "Now I lay me down to sleep" prayer. I still remember all of it. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, which is a nice thought for a kid, you know. I pray the Lord my soul to take. Hey, I'm going to start over. You missed the opening song and everything. I'll hit it again at the end. Welcome. Thank you for coming. You didn't miss anything good. If I should die before I wake and all that. Anyway, I pray the Lord my soul to take. God bless Mom, Dad, Mark, my brothers, Mark, Tom, Andy, and Teddy, both grandmas and grandfathers, aunts, uncles, cousins, and our longtime housekeeper, Perkins, our schnauzer. Those were our prayers. The next Sunday, my mom enrolls us in a Sunday school. And it didn't really pan out. We'd never been to a synagogue except to see my parents in the shows. So the teacher said, "Who knows a prayer?" You know, and I wanted to be in show business, so I raised my hand. You know, I'm all excited. I'm getting in front of people. I raised my hand. She says, "Go ahead." And I started to say the Lord's Prayer. Because when I grew up in the 50s in elementary school, every day you said the Lord's Prayer. I didn't know any of that. And the "Now I lay me" prayer. That was it. And the woman said, "No, a Jewish prayer." And I was, humiliated and confused. I mean, she started screaming at me. I mean, everyone in my prayer was Jewish. My "Now I lay me down to sleep" prayer was Jewish, except Dan and maybe Perkins. And she keeps yelling at me like I personally gave up the Frank family or something. And to make it worse, for religious inspiration and Talmudic wisdom, she takes us all, these little kids, me and one of the kids, takes us to sit at the feet of Rabbi Lopp. Now, Rabbi Lopp was a 400-year-old man sitting in a chair like this, like he's that old kind of guy. When you get that old, I'm just about there where your shoulders of your coat's here, your belt's here, you know what I mean? That's how you know how old you're getting, wherever your belt is. Anyway, he starts, and he's shaking like this. And we're all circled around him like this, looking up at him like this. And he's just going like this. And the teacher says, "We'll be right back. Rabbi Lopp will tell you," and leaves. And we're looking at this old guy going like this. Doesn't say anything. And all of a sudden, we're on the floor, 10 minutes, looking up at what I could only hope were soup stains at his crotch. Rabbi Lopp was not inspirational. You see, the Jewish religion doesn't proselytize, really. They aren't out to convert anybody. So they really don't need charismatic characters like Bishop Sheen, who was so handsome and classy, and Billy Graham, or now Joel Osteen with his countless suits and ties and rows of teeth. You see, those guys are looking for converts. Jews don't want any additional Jews. They just want people to stop killing the ones they have. Let's face it. So we must rely on old guys like Rabbi Lopp to provide us with Talmudic wisdom, for which we sat waiting. And he's just doing this. We're looking up at him like this. Finally he goes, "I'm reminded of the parable of the little crippled goat boy of the village. The kindly white Dybbuk, Schnaubel's mother, said to him as he lay in his bed of hay and yams and flaming, 'Go, Schnaubel, fetch the schmear turkey for the festival.'" And then he just does this again. We're sitting like this. Another pause, and he goes, "Shalim Alahim," and we're all like, I wet my pants, my hair turned this color, I had an asthma attack, rushed to the doctors. I had such a bad asthma attack that I rushed from there. I actually blacked out, which is a true story. I was so overwhelmed and out of my league. I woke up in a hospital, in a Catholic hospital. The first thing I see in this hospital, I used to black out quite a lot with asthma. In my day, you go to the doctor, you black out, you wake up at the doctor's, he give you adrenaline. That was the medicine. So I go home, 7 years old, higher than, I wrote a novel on the way home in the car, So high I was on speed. It was great. Anyway, and I'm in a Catholic hospital. I wake up, and the first thing I see is a giant crucifix on the wall, which I'd seen them on TV, and a beautiful nun. This nun was more beautiful than Deborah Carr in Heaven Knows Mr. Allison. Great movie, which also starred Robert Mitchum. Now, if you'll allow me a moment, I can't mention that picture without acknowledging how underrated Robert Mitchum was as an actor. I know that's off subject, but certain things must be made clear, ladies and gentlemen. But on a more meaningful level, the kid in the very next bed to me that night in the hospital, he had leukemia. I didn't know what that was, 1957. But asthma started looking pretty good to me. The nurses came in at all hours with hypodermic needles to take this poor kid's blood. No more blood, he'd scream. One of the mornings, I wake up and the kid's mattress is folded over and the nuns are standing around him crying. That was my second brush with death in about a 3-week period. My grandfather was old, it kind of made sense, but this boy was my age, kind of looked like me, was blonde, and they're all saying things like he's in a better place, he's with God, and all I can think of is how can a nice guy like God let a thing like this happen? But here's the big part. Hold on, folks. I had already been wondering why God had created the lobster boy. I had seen the lobster boy at a freak show at the Dade County Carnival, along with the bearded lady and the table man, a gentleman with 4 legs. The lobster boy, to be honest, he wasn't a boy and he wasn't a lobster, but from the painting outside the tent, I expected him to be sitting in a tub of butter sauce. He was, in fact, just a little middle-aged man dressed in a red tracksuit, but instead of regular hands, he had 2 thick claws. Oh, I'll get it. 2 thick claws on each hands instead of fingers. And maybe you've seen it, there's a documentary about this guy. And I'm like 11, I'm seeing this. And I never could forget it. And he did a little song, I'm the lobster boy, and I'm sitting there in this tent, and he sang it in what I guess was a lobster voice. I really had nothing to, compare it to. And, right now, nowadays you could never have a sideshow like the woke thing. We're all in the woke. The most you could hope for now would be, hurry, 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 step right in, the little boy who can't eat wheat. That would be the freak show. But that's the most you could hope for, or the trans bearded lady. I don't know what it would be, and it'd be some kid eating gluten-free cupcakes, some freak show. But anyway, the lobster boy was upsetting and sad, and I could not understand how God could let a thing like that happen. You didn't see people like that back then, or now for that matter. So I asked my father to explain the lobster boy. And he put his arm around me, he walked me into the yard, and he said, Tommy, in this life, you're going to find out that some people are destined to be novelty acts. There's a missed opportunity. I was hoping for some kind of answer to all this. Like what's it all about? But according to my father, it was about how you would be billed on the Ed Sullivan Show. That was life. You get your religion from your parents, and for my parents, it was show business. Show business had its own mythology, its own gods and goddesses. Hollywood was Mount Olympus, and they all lived there, except for the people in horror films who were forced to live in the valley. I worshipped people like Bob Hope, Jack Benny, Art Carney, Jackie Gleason, Jonathan Winters, Steve Allen, my gods of comedy, all of whom I was, thank God, writing for 5 years out of high school. I just was so lucky. And I actually ended up writing for most of them. I also wrote and performed with Donald O'Connor, not Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire. I had seen them, but I actually worked with Donald O'Connor. These were the gods of dance. My personal goddess of love, Kim Novak. Gentlemen, we remember, a certain age. And Zeus, of course, Mr. Frank Sinatra. I worship Frank Sinatra. I spent a large portion of every day thinking about Frank Sinatra. What other 10-year-old kid thinks about Frank Sinatra so much? I even wore a Cracker Jack ring in my pinky finger that I pretended was a friendship ring given to me by Chicago crime boss Sam Momo Giancana. That's how into Frank and the Rat Pack I was, ladies and gentlemen. This is a little side thing. I was thinking about this the other day. Bear with me. But I started thinking the other day, because I was so obsessed with Sinatra, I kept thinking, what a great Frank Sinatra Jr. I would have made. What a better Frank Sinatra Jr. I would have made than Frank Sinatra Jr. Because I would not have tried to be a singer. I would have been a brain surgeon. Imagine paging Dr. Sinatra, you know. Imagine the girls you get. You're a surgeon and you're Frank Sinatra's son. Anyway, again, off a little subject, but I'm a little ADD. Please forgive me. Now, I love Frank Sinatra, but I had a pretty great dad, so I didn't have to imagine that to be Frank Sinatra's son. I was Paul Leopold's son. That was pretty good, too. And he was a great guy, my dad. And as I said, he gave me my love of show business, but not, thank God, his love of smoking. He was a devout and ritualistic smoker, my dad. He smoked better than Humphrey Bogart. He was awesome. Fanning the top of that Zippo lighter that got him through the Pacific War, Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal. He'd flip it like that, and like a gunslinger, he'd light his cigarette and put his lighter away like that, and he'd take that big first beautiful hit of nicotine, and he'd make that face, you know. They all made those faces, like this. And he'd give out with this knowledge, you know, this wisdom, my dad. He'd go, Tommy, he used to say kid, because there's 4 of us. He'd call everybody kid, including my mother. He'd say, kid, take care of your clothes, kid. You know, wisdom like that. Dress like you don't need the job, kid. Great. Stuff I take with me to this day. He loved his Salems, right? Well, my dad passed away at 59 from smoking. And I'll just jump right to the sad part. I felt there was something missing at my dad's funeral. I mean, the rabbi said some beautiful poetic things in his eulogy, but the man never met my father. At one point, my little brother Andy whispers to me, are we at the right funeral? I don't even know what the guy's talking. It's like we weren't even at the right funeral. Now, I realize if we had been affiliated with a temple on a regular basis, as opposed to just 2 smash nights in the musical theater, we would have had a rabbi there who really knew my father and could have said some factual great stuff about him and be a source of comfort to us. That's the one great thing about faith and belonging. I've been to other funerals and weddings and other things, you know, religious things where the priest or whoever it was didn't really know the person, you know, and you can always tell, especially if they're wearing golf shoes. That's the giveaway. Sadly, my dad missed out on a lot of my stuff that he would have been so proud of. He missed out on, he never got to see me make it to the degree I did in his beloved show business. He never met my lovely wife, Barbara, who has asked me not to use her real name, so I'm just going to call her Joan for us here, if that's okay. Let's keep that under our... And he wasn't around when my 3 novels were published to wonderfully mixed reviews. Oh, there goes my water. Anyway, he wasn't around, and I'll get off this subject, when I was dating a string of almost beautiful women out in Hollywood, I must say. But all that, my early life in show business, you know, my 20s and 30s were pretty much about having a good time, you know, but sex and drugs, how long can the thrill really last? For me, the Carter and halfway through the Reagan administration. And then I got really lucky. And I met a fantastic woman, Joan, Barbara's her real name, but who my father would have loved. And we were married. which had its own religious issues. You see, she was Catholic, Barbara, and I was culturally Jewish. And though my mother was thrilled to death with Barbara and happy that I was finally getting married, she wasn't ready for it to take place in a church, and Barbara's parents had never seen a Jew up close. So I didn't want to rub a rabbi in their faces, you know? So we made the obvious choice, compromise. We ended up being married by a female Nigerian Episcopal minister at our favorite Mexican restaurant, Dos Feliz Caballeros, a gay bar with the best guacamole in Manhattan, you know, and things were great. And my life, my career was good. I couldn't believe it, me of all people. And a couple of years later, our first beautiful child, Olivia, was born. And a couple of years after that, Augusta, our Gussie, was born, and we were blessed. I never stopped to think by who. I knew we were lucky, and I was very grateful. But I figured I was just living the cultural, ethical life I was brought up in, and so religion never really entered my mind. I mean, God had been so good to me that I didn't want to, you know, hurt his feelings or make him angry, because it's very hard to play the guitar with leprosy. I don't know if people know that. Anyway, obviously I had given God and religion a lot of thought, going back to the lobster boy, but not serious enough to do anything about it. Then, a few years ago now, like about 15 years ago now, something happened that made me feel the need for something more, something deeper. When our youngest daughter, Gussie, was 12, she was afflicted with a life-threatening eating disorder. And after months of doctors, therapies, rehabs, no answers. There was really nothing we could do to help our beautiful, funny, talented little girl. And I had been terrified in my life, sick many times, but those were just things happening to me, you know, and not to someone I loved more than me. Your children are everything, and you want to make things okay for them. It is said so beautifully by Lillian Gish in the movie The Night of the Hunter. Anybody remember it? Great movie, which also happened to star Robert Mitchum, but that's not the point. At the end of this movie, Lillian Gish says, "Children are man at his best. They abide and they endure." And then, unfortunately, Robert Mitchum kills her. But it's true nevertheless. Kids are the best of us. And one of ours looked like she might not endure. And I was lost. Then, around that time, some unusual things began to happen. Maybe I was looking, but it was like I was on this path and I didn't know it. We were at Radio City Music Hall show. Everybody's been to the great Radio City. Gotta go, especially when you have kids. We took our two daughters every year. And as usual, I was impressed with the choreography of those amazing Rockettes with their multiple legs. And once again, hoping that fat male skater spinning on that piece of plastic ice would fall. And I'm not proud of that, Father. I'm not proud of that, wishing that on that man. But for the first time ever, and we went every year, at the end of the nativity scene, why am I spitting on myself? It's good luck. Hold on. At the end of the nativity scene, with the real camels, you know, and the Rockettes dressed up like villagers and wise men with great legs, Gussie, my little Gussie, cuddled up next to me. And when I put my arm around her, I could feel how her illness had made her so small. And, well, I identified with Mary as a parent. There she was, starting out with all the plans we hope and hopes we all have, and at the crucifixion, suffering for her child, and she could do nothing for him. And I had a little sense of how that felt. A couple of weeks later, Joan, I'm just going to go with Barbara. Don't tell her. We went to see this stupid movie called The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Has anybody ever seen this movie? I didn't really want to go to see Jim Carrey not be funny, But Barbara had watched Steven Seagal's reality show with me, and how do you pay a woman back for that? The movie was so crowded, we had to sit in the very front row and stare up at the screen, and made me nauseous, and I didn't understand the story. And I don't think Jim Carrey understood it either, but unlike Jim, I could leave, which I did. Barbara said, okay, go ahead. Because I had noticed walking in that the remake of the movie Walking Tall was playing. Now, I love the original Walking Tall with Joe Don Baker as Buford Pusser, and I couldn't imagine how Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson could be any better. Of course, Robert Mitchum would have nailed it, but anyway, the trouble is Walking Tall had just started playing, right? And the only other picture just about to start was The Passion of Christ, which I hadn't planned to see. But it was directed by Mel Gibson, who I think we all agree took one too many blows to the head in Braveheart. But I liked his movies. And I know there's a lot of controversy about it at the time, but it was beautiful filmmaking. And I had so little opportunity to use my Aramaic. And I'm sitting there, hardly anyone in the theater, and there was a scene at the very end of The Passion where Jesus, played by Jim Caviezel, who, by the way, is my favorite movie Jesus of all time. Jeffrey Hunter, that old movie, he looked like a guy who gets you towels at, Club Med or something, with the blue eyes. And Max von Sydow, he was a great actor, but a humorless Jesus. And I like to think Jesus cracked a smile once in a while. I mean, walking on water, that's got to be a grin, What got me was, at the end of The Passion, the very last scene in The Passion, when Jim Caviezel's in the tomb, after the crucifixion, before the stone has been rolled away, and he's down on all fours, like a runner on starting blocks, waiting for the gun, and then the stone rolls, and he's bathed in light, and bam! He bolts out of frame, and Jesus is resurrected. And it was so powerful, I could not get it out of my mind. And a couple of months later, Gussie, our girl, had yet to go to another hospital. Had lost count at that point. And but this one was different. Remuda Ranch in Arizona. It was a Christian hospital, and they had a high success rate. So we liked it. And they had horses and equine therapy, and we thought that would help because she was a good rider. But first we had to get her there. So we took the first plane out in the morning while she was still groggy, and we could get her to go. The hospital was in this little tiny town of Wickenburg, Arizona, a 2-hour drive from Phoenix. And for a New Yorker, seeing a desert for the first time, it's like being on another planet. It's nothing, but a long panorama of nothing until the nothing meets the mountains. The hospital was a Spanish-style, beautiful, very lovely hospital, more like a hotel. And there was a lot of anxiety in the car, until these lovely, calm therapists came out to meet us, and they greeted our daughter like they were truly happy to see her and help her. So it started to feel okay, at least to Barbara and me. But Gussie didn't want to be there, and who could blame her? And we left in an hour, like we were told we had to do. We weren't going to see her again for 4 months. That's how their treatment worked, and we were desperate at that point. And we were never so sad. We had to stay over till the next day, and we just sat in the car, my wife and I, not knowing what to do. And finally, Barbara says, maybe we should go to the Vortex in Sedona, a place she had heard about that is supposed to have like magical powers. I didn't know anything about it, the harmonic convergence, something, I don't know. And maybe we get some kind of sign, So it was wiped out as we were. We drive to the Vortex, hours over these scary mountains. No idea where we're going. Finally, we get there, and the only way we know we're there are all these pink Vortex trams driving back and forth. And we're not tram people, so we decided to find our own way to the Vortex, which was a mistake. We were standing on a mound of red dirt behind a shopping center, trying to feel at one with the universe, until a Domino's pizza kid said, "Hey, whoa, Vortex, 2 miles." So we get to the Vortex, which looks like every other hill in Arizona. The only difference, it's swarming with Japanese people with cameras. Barbara and I, we each went off by ourselves, just trying to feel something magical. I really tried, but I kept getting interrupted by Japanese couples asking me to take their picture. And Barbara came and she said that she saw some eagles circling above, and she really took that as her sign and went back to the car for a nap. I didn't feel anything. I finally made it up to this ridge, and I realized I was looking down at Monument Valley, and that is where John Ford directed every Western. Those great red hills, and all those great Sport Yellow Ribbon and all that stuff. And all those great movies. I love those movies. So, without hesitation, I took that as my sign. And I went back to the car, and Barbara looked so peaceful. I took a nap, took naps. And we did not see our Gus until Christmas. And even then, the doctors would only let us have her for Christmas Day. So Christmas Eve, Barbara, Livy, our oldest, Livy, Gussie's great big sister, who had been such a great and loving big sister through all this, we're all decorating this little Dude Ranch motel room in Wickenburg with Christmas stuff we had gotten from the only store still open in the desert town, the dollar store. The Tiffany's of Wickenburg, as we like to call it. And each of us was trying not to let the other one know how sad we were that one of us was missing. We went to bed early. I was in the upper bunk. Barbara won the toss. And as I lay there in the dark that night, it was the closest I had ever come to breaking. Not breaking down, breaking. And I found myself praying without even realizing I was praying. Now, as we all know by now, I had no religious training except what I got from movies and TV. So I realized I'm praying like I saw Ward Bond pray in an episode of Wagon Train when I was a kid. The wagon master goes behind this chuck wagon and he takes off his Stetson and he says, Lord, I'm not a praying man, but if you just let this little girl live till we get through Comanche territory, why, I'll buy her that calico dress. She's always going on. And I thought to myself, no, idiot. You can't pray like Ward Bond in Wagon Train. What's the matter with you? And then I finally just, for the first time in my life, I just said, God, give me even the smallest sign you're up there. I just can't make it alone. And then the Ambien did its magic fairy dance, and I was asleep. And Barbara and I got up around 4 a.m, it's Christmas morning, and we walked out into the desert, which is right behind the hotel. Whole desert, nobody there, Christmas morning. And I don't know, maybe it was how vulnerable I felt, but there were still a billion stars out, and the sky was a color I had never seen, and the air was sweet. I'd have to say it felt biblical. The only thing missing was a heavenly messenger. And then he showed up on a motorcycle with deer antlers for handlebars and a leathery old ex-Marine face that made Clint Eastwood look like Jim Parsons, the guy on Lottery Dream House. I can't remember his name. David. I liked him. Anyway, this guy in this motorcycle with deer antlers for handlebars drives up over this mountain, sun coming up behind him. It comes and stops right in front of us. There's nobody in the desert but us. He stops right in front of us, like here, looking at me and Barbara, and he goes into this monologue about how he was married to a woman named Shepherd, and she had brought him to Jesus at 33. And the whole while he keeps nodding at me, and saying, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. And I wasn't sure he was even there. I thought it was one of those things, one of those side effects of Ambien, where you might wake up in Spain eating an entire cake. I thought it was like that. I wasn't even sure the guy was there. And at this point, the sun now is coming up right behind the guy's head, like a halo. And he runs his engine, peels off, comes back again. My wife would tell you this. He looks at me again and he goes, God is watching you. Drives away. Okay? And he's gone. And I felt like in some way maybe it had something to do with my prayer. God is watching you. He's gone into the sunrise. It was too perfect. We just stood there, I don't know how long, stunned. we go back to the hotel, and I'm shaky, and I'm still not sure what to make it. So I told the guy at the desk, hoping that he'd say, tell him what happened. I was hoping the blood would drain from his face, and he'd start to tremble and go, "You saw old Jim? Why, he's been dead from a motorcycle accident 20, but he didn't say that. I was really hoping for that too. But no, he says, "No, I know that guy. He owns the bakery in town." Scones were great. It was not the epiphany I was hoping for, but my wife and I were really impressed with what he had said. God is watching you. His name was Shepherd. Jesus had a flock. He came to Jesus at 33. Jesus died at 33 on Christmas Day. This is Christmas morning. Okay, we're both looking for some kind of sign that everything was going to be okay. We would have settled for anything. We were high for 4 days from a fortune cookie that said you were a very lucky man, and it was Barbara's cookie. Grasping at straws, basically. So we spent the week there in Wickenburg, and we got to see how special these people were at this hospital. Talk about truth in advertising. They said they were Christians, and they were. They were warm, and they were caring, and they weren't judgmental, and they were loving. And it was a great week. And at the end, they asked the parents and the families to maybe make a speech or something, or, about the week that we all spent together. And so it was a group session. They wanted everybody to express their feelings, tell a poem, or it's very inspirational. And I had borrowed a guitar from somebody there, and I wrote this song, and it's called Someday Soon, and I wrote it for Gussie. The pick thieves are coming. Anyway, it's called Someday Soon. Someday soon the stars will align, though they're light years behind. Someday soon our ship will come in, even if we have to swim to meet it. We ain't defeated, the fates will change their tune. Someday soon. Hold on, everybody. Stay in tune. Turn the page. I'm a man of a certain age. Someday soon, this too shall pass. We'll make it to the greener grass. We've struggled before. We'll struggle some more. But we'll pick ourselves up off our ass. The voice inside. The world will step aside for the ladies in this room. Someday soon. Every dog must have his day. You'll forgive the cheap cliche. Sure as July follows June, we'll be happy someday soon. God, if you exist, how could you do this? I stomped my foot and shook my fist. We followed your rules, got good grades in school, called everybody Mr. and misery and shame will be our middle name till God's light fills this room someday soon. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so the next day we all had to leave. All the families had to leave. And as sad as it was, we all felt, along with our daughter, that she was getting something from this experience. Some hope, And it was a better goodbye than the last goodbye with Gus. We got home, back to New York City, and it was a painful time with nothing to do but wait and to hope. And then more, now I don't look at them as coincidences, but certainly did then, strange things began to happen that I could not explain. One night, I had just finished having dinner with my very best friend, Paul. And I'll name drop now because he's my best friend. I've known him 50 years. Paul Schaefer, the piano player from the Letterman show. I don't have friends outside of show business, so anything I say is going to sound like name dropping. But anyway, that's Paul. And we're walking down Madison Avenue. We had boys' night out once a week. We're on Madison Avenue, and this homeless guy comes up to us, which happens all the time in New York. You know, you really have to become selective about who you give money to, because, you know, there's people always holding out paper cups all over the place. One time I was walking down the street and I dropped some change into this guy's cup and coffee splashed out. He was a construction guy on a break. He almost killed me, this guy. True. So anyway, this guy, there was something about this guy. He was not badly dressed. I mean, in bum terms, he was rather elegant. He asked me for some money, and I don't know, I said, look, there's a deli there on the corner. I'll buy you a sandwich. Now, usually in those situations, you know, the homeless guy will just take off because he really wants money for drugs or booze or, mic on? Yeah. But this guy was thrilled to death. And all the way down the street, he's placing his order with me. Like I'm going to make him the sandwich or something like ham, provolone, not too much mayonnaise, salt and pepper on a sesame roll, lettuce, tomato. Paul says to the guy, perhaps a lovely Merlot. Yeah. We get to the deli. And the deli's department is closed. And I look around, I go, dude, just buy whatever, I'll buy you. He says, just give me $5, I'll go to McDonald's. I go, what am I doing, making a project out of this guy? So I gave him $5, and I handed to him, or a couple of dollars, I don't remember how much. And then his whole visage, which is a word I can barely say and I've ever hardly used, absolutely changed. It was like another person came out of this guy. And he just took the money, and he was no longer this kind of desperate guy. He just said, thanks, Tom, and leaves. Paul and I are standing there. Now, at no point did Paul ever say Tom. Paul hasn't called me Tom for 50 years. We have these little nicknames, you know, mine, Leo, Tom Leopold, I'm Leo, or other thing. I don't know how the guy knew my name. No, we hadn't said my name. He leaves, and I didn't go after him because I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know if it was, you know, one way or other. I didn't want to know. It was too scary. Anyway, a few days after that, Gussie was due to come home, which we were thrilled about. But, you know, this is my mime for heart attack. Very novel, right? And I'm watching TV, and I see a young priest on TV. And I thought he was great, you know. His name was Father Jonathan Morris. I don't know if you guys ever heard of him. He was on TV quite often. And very handsome guy. So handsome. I didn't have my glasses on. I thought I was watching a remake of The Thornbirds. Remember that? Guy was so good looking. It's like, as I said to him years later, I said, Jonathan, you look just like the guy they'd hire to be you on a show. And he was talking about this book he had just written, as you were saying, about grief, called The Promise, and how one can find grace through suffering. Suffering I was good. I had suffering down good. Grace I needed help. So I bought the book, and it really gave me comfort, the way he wrote about faith and religion and God. I mean, I knew nothing, except for TV, about anything like that. But I was starting to begin to feel that things were sort of all connected. I was looking for something, and there were all these kind of weird signs pointing me somewhere. Gussie was due home soon, which was great, but very anxiety-provoking. We had hoped that Arizona had done some good, but no idea what to do if it hadn't, because there was really getting nothing left to do. So I took the obvious next step, because I'm such a smart guy. I went to see a psychic, Frank Andrews. Now, I had gone to see Frank Andrews when I was 22. when I was in crisis. My girlfriend had left me for a handyman I had hired to fix our toilet. Anyway, I was crushed, and I didn't know what to do. And a friend said to me, hey, I just saw this psychic. Go see him. I was just busted up for this girl leaving me. But I didn't need a psychic. I needed a girlfriend and a plumber. But I went. And this guy, Frank Andrews, down in Little Italy, Nolita, he was amazing. He predicted, I was about 22 then, he predicted my entire life. I'd be a writer, I'd do this, all that sort of thing. It was absolutely remarkable. And I saw him then, and he put me onto a shrink, this old guy, and he predicted really everything. So now, 35 years later, Gussie's coming home, and I'm so desperate that I call Frank again, and he remembered me. And he was beautiful. And he says, come on down. So I just wanted to hear something somewhere. Oh, yeah, it's going to be okay, something, And so I get there. Frank takes out tarot cards. And I know, Father, where's Father? Is he here? Oh, he couldn't take it anymore. Oh, there you are. Father, I know you're not allowed to go see psychics. I haven't done it since. May the Lord... No, I'm good. Anyway, he laid out these tarot cards. He's still my friend, but I don't go in for psychics. And he lays out all these cards, and the very first thing he says to me, I haven't seen him for like 35 years. He's got the crystal ball and everything. The first thing he says to me is, don't you ever go on a hot air balloon ride. The joke is, the week or so before, when we were in Arizona, the very last day, we were with Gussie. We had to bring her back. We only had her Christmas Day. And we have to drive her back, and the sun's coming down. And it's Christmas. I wanted to do something kind of great, And we're driving back, and I see hot air balloon rides. The guy's giving hot air balloon rides. And I'm terrified of heights and rats, but that's another story. So I peel off, I do a U-turn, I drive up to the hot air balloon guy. And I'm going to go up in this thing, even though I'm terrified. I got to give her something, And the guy says, no, I can't. It's too dark. It's coming down. I can't go. So a week later, when I'm sitting with Frank, the very first, he didn't say anything about Gussie, but he says, don't ever go on a hot air balloon ride. So got my attention, So I asked him if he could see anything about my kid, and he was murky about that. I was dejected. But when I left, I'm walking out the steps of Frank Andrews' townhouse in Nolita, downtown Manhattan. And at that very moment, a car pulls up right in front of me. And out comes a priest, but not just any priest, the one from the grief book, the Thornbirds guy, out of nowhere. And I say to Barbara, that's the guy from my book. That morning, his book was on my nightstand with his picture, like his handsome picture, looking at me, that morning. And he gets out right in front of me. And now in the book, he said he worked at the Vatican. He was the press liaison for the Vatican. And he gets out, and I go, and my Barbara says, that can't be the guy. Said, that's the guy, that's the priest. So I said, Father, I got your book on my nightstand. And he smiled, he started over towards me, he held out his hand, I took it. And suddenly I'm saying, Father, do you think you might have a few minutes to talk to me sometime? And he said, depends, did you pay full price for the book? You got a bigger laugh with the joke than I did. He says, I said, where can I find you? He says, oh, you can find me right here. And he turns around and points directly behind him across the street to Old St. Pat's Basilica, directly across the street from the psychic. The psychic and the, I don't have the name, just went out, but where you guys live, over there, the rectory, thanks. They shared a wall. And he had just been moved from Rome to run Old St. Patrick's right then. And you can find me right there. He turns around, Old St. Pat, right on Mulberry. I've been on Mulberry Street a million times, never even noticed the church there. It's like it hadn't been there till he pointed to it. So we talked for a minute, and then he says to call him, and we'd have coffee, just like a regular person, I never met a priest before, except even at that moment, it was comforting to be around him. Just felt it. And true to his word, Father John found time for me and we had coffee. And for some reason, I wish I had worn a belt. No, for some reason, there's another reason. For some reason, I was very nervous to be around him. I mean, I am not used to hanging out with a man of God, okay? I've hung around with some pretty big movie stars, TV stars who thought they were God, but this was different. Father Jonathan has a quality, that the reality of God was a foregone conclusion. It wasn't a discussion. And I just found myself telling him all these things that had been like coincidences to me. The crusty old guy, the deer antler handlebars, mystical guy in the desert, the homeless deli guy knowing my name, and my having his book and him and pull it right in front of me. And he said there were no coincidences. God does have a plan, and there is a supernatural reality. And that's how all this stuff that I had been experiencing was feeling to me. Because, as he said, I was open to something more meaningful in my life. And many people come to God through suffering. You said it better than I will, but the one funny, memorable moment that was said that his favorite Seinfeld episode was the cafe. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but where Babu Bhatt goes, "Daddy, you're a bad man, you're a bad man." I wrote that, and he says, I said, "Yeah, I wrote that." And he goes, and he did his impression of Babu Bhatt, the priest, Father Jonathan. I said, "Not bad, Father, not great. Don't leave the daytime work, but for a priest, it was a good impression." We had coffee, and it was great to be around him, and I had so many questions. He suggested that I take some classes, and they were really interesting. I learned more about Judaism than I had ever known. For example, did you guys know that in the Bible, unlike the movie, The Ten Commandments, there is no reference in Exodus where Edward G. Robinson says, "Where's your Messiah now, Moses?" It's not in the Bible, just in case you want to watch. See. Speaking of Ten Commandments, every star in Hollywood had a cameo, but do you think Cecil B. DeMille would pick up a phone and call Robert Mitchum? No, he wasn't. John Derrick was in it. They don't put Robert. Anyway, don't get me started. Anyway, I don't know when I actually started thinking about converting. It was such a gradual process. I didn't even know I was in it. I must admit, though, I always liked Jesus as a person. For me, he had this kind of James Dean, Bob Dylan kind of rebel thing, about him. Once in a while, I did wonder if I had been there at the time, would I have been a disciple? Of course, there wasn't room for me in the painting of the Last Supper, but it was a Seder. I could have sat at the cousin's table. I was never deep enough to wrestle with the concept of Jesus being the Son of God. But the apostles had the extra benefit of seeing miracles. Right? Hey, hear about Lazarus? Lazarus is dead. Not anymore. My ending up at Old St. Pat's taking Catholic lessons was no raising of Lazarus, but in the long run, religion is a leap of faith. And everything that had happened, I felt, made me ready to leap because, I don't know, I guess Father Jonathan had given me the answer to the lobster boy. I'm not saying I converted to Catholicism because of the lobster boy, but yes, I am. I am saying that. I guess I knew I was serious about it, converting that is, when I wondered how I was going to tell my mother that I was going to be Catholic. Okay? So in my next meeting with Father Jonathan, I casually asked, "Hey, Father, you guys don't put on any musicals here or anything, do you?" I mean, I figured, if I could tell my mother they offered me the role of Riff in West Side Story, and they were going to find a more mature Maria for me, something that could, make her feel better. But she was fine with it. And of course, there were bigger things to think about. I knew there would be sacrifices too. And as we all know by now, I tend to be a trifle obsessive. So what I would give up for Lent became a full-time occupation for me. I knew it had to be something I loved and that I would miss. And since I don't drink or smoke, I decided, and I hate to admit it, I'm embarrassed, to give up pouring. That's a long time ago, Father. But I swear, watched porn when we had electricity. Only then. That's only when I would do it. On the plus side, all of my sins would be washed away at my first baptism. What a thing, you know? And I had plenty, you know? Certainly, that sin of taking all the amenities from those 5-star hotels I always took, even if I was just visiting a friend. I still have a closet full of body lotion from the Crillon in Paris. Of course, I also took a robe, but anyway. I figured I could start that off, you know, my first confession, my very first confession, which made me so anxious. But on the plus side, because of all our medical bills, I had to stop going to my shrink. I had to give up going to a shrink because I couldn't afford it. So many medical bills. And the Writers Guild didn't consider dying of an eating disorder as being a medical problem. So anyway, don't get into that. They're great, though. Anyway, the only difference about, you know, I had to give up my shrink, which I've always viewed as therapy, you know, stop going to my shrink. I've viewed therapy as Jewish confession. That's how I always looked at it. The only difference is a priest won't cut your session short on a Friday because he wants to beat the traffic out to the Hamptons. Of course, my big concern about confession was that it would be Father Jonathan, who had a pretty good impression of me. I didn't want to blow it, you know, I didn't want to ruin it, disappoint him. I was like a Broadway show myself, right? And he was like the New York Times theater reviewer. And I didn't want him to think, yo, Leopold's sins disappoint. I didn't want to see that headline, you know? So like a Broadway show, I considered taking my confessions on the road, you know, workshop it in other churches to warm up, you know, bring it into town, you know, rehearsed. But then sanity made a very infrequent stop at my door, and I realized none of that was important. And that's when I knew I had found faith. It didn't matter what anybody else thought of me, as long as I was honest with myself and therefore with the commander, God, and I felt a lightness come over me. And even my mom said, okay, if it makes you happy, convert to Catholicism. If it'll make me call me more often, you know, great. And my friends, all in show business, were so wonderful. They were terrific. Of course, since most of them were in the world of comedy, they worked me pretty good. You know, they tortured me pretty good about it. But in fact, my best friend, Paul Schaefer, who's a very observant Jew and the most moral and hippest guy in the world, hosted for me a Tom Leopold's absolutely last day as a Jew roast. True. You can read about it at Sammy's Romanian restaurant, a kosher restaurant on the Lower East Side. And the timing was perfect because I had eaten there 10 years before, and the meal had finally started to work its way through me, so it was great, you know. And Paul came out of this big roast. All my friends were, people flew in to torture me in a loving way at the roast. My friend Harry Shearer arrived. He's in Spinal Tap, you know, and he does the Simpsons voice. He had rented an entire Hasidic rabbi outfit and performed an intervention. Tamila, you can't leave, you know. Anyway, and Paul's opening line was fantastic. He says, wow, what a night, huh? Does Tom Leopold know how to abandon his people or what? It was one of the greatest nights of my life, with all my friends ripping me to shreds. It was heavenly. And Paul even had a gospel choir there. And they all started singing, oh, happy day, oh, happy day. And that weekend was Easter, and I was baptized. And did the world change? No. Does our daughter still struggle? Somewhat. But boy, we never thought we'd get here. And she's miraculously improved, thank God. And in many ways, even though she doesn't struggle as much, I don't either, because I have an understanding of, oh, why beat around a burning bush? I have faith. And I didn't know how much I missed it till I got some. And I'd like to finish up with this song I wrote around then called Isn't It Amazing? If you don't mind. One more? Am I mic'd? Oh well, it is what it is. Isn't it amazing in this day and age? We can make it on a working wage. Isn't it amazing what the word... Wait. Would you forgive me? I'm sorry, I blew it. I want to start again because it's good, if I do say so myself. Isn't it amazing in this day and age? We can make it on a working wage. Isn't it amazing when we turn the page? The chapter's new. Isn't it amazing all the luck we've had? Our good luck always trumps our bad. You're a mother now, I'm a dad. It amazes me. I had this dream last night. There was this awful fight. I was trying to make the whole world right for everyone. Can't be done. You're the engine, baby, you're the glue. That's why this boy will stick with you. Isn't it amazing what the world we knew is a-going through? We'll make it too. I had this dream last night. My father stood in the light. He said, "Kid, you did all right for everyone." Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Oh, thank you.
It was wonderful.
It's a privilege.
We'd love for everybody to join us in the hall for some desserts and snacks. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out. Hope it's all right. Thanks. Come join us in the hall.